Ultimately, the game is indirectly telling the player that their triumph over the monsters are not an achievement, and even if you slay 1,000 or 10,000 of these Kashela Dioras, the player will eventually die.
Boom! Oh my god. That could only come from a mind of someone who reviews Monster Hunter DOS for 3.5 hours. Hey, the name's KRRool. That's KRRool. Welcome to the supercut of my live reaction to Jakob's Monster Hunter DOS review. If you haven't seen the original, I highly recommend watching that first. The link to the video will be in the description below. It's important to note that this video is heavily edited, and some context might get lost along the way as a result. So again, I implore you to watch the original video before jumping to any conclusions. I want to be abundantly clear that I have nothing but the utmost respect for Jakob and what he's created. His original video has sparked multiple debates in the Monster Hunter community, and the purpose of this video is to engage with that debate and spread it further if possible. So thank you, Jakob, for giving the community so much to discuss. It's a real gift. And with that out of the way, let's dive into the video.
The games weren't as fun. Or it wasn't fun back when you had to do
I'm
blank.
not like that.
Gathering quests. Now, if you're new and you've only played
ripping
Monster
guide,
World,
you
you
didn't
probably
even
don't
hear.
even know that these existed, and that's for the better, trust me. It's not fun at all.
Fun is a subjective value. It's
I agree with
meaningless
what
in
Jacob's
objective
saying there.
discussion.
When so many people like eat up every word you say, it's like it becomes a consensus within the community, and like that's where people start getting in fights and stuff, and they're like, oh, Gaijin Hunter said this, so it's true. And I mean, like, I know that's not his intention, but I mean, it is what kind of happens.
So then you get into situations like this, which is super annoying, where you're trying to mine an area for items, but you have to swap or discard stuff, and you're getting attacked by small monsters all at the same time. Not a fun time.
Actually, you're just not playing the game correctly.
If we go over to Monster Hunter
Now,
World,
I think you can criticize Jakob there as well. Monster Hunter actually doesn't teach you a whole lot. I don't think you can say you're playing it correctly. I think the way he is playing it would be frustrating, because I mean, if he would go in there with the mindset that you have to clear out the monsters first and prepare to have enough space in your inventory for the items you want to gather, then it would be more enjoyable.
Again, there was no challenge or strategy in bringing items and managing your item pouch just to collect stuff.
What are you talking about? That is strategy. There is strategy. What? The Monster Hunter franchise started as a fantasy hunting survival simulator action multiplayer series, but has been transformed into a fantasy hunting action multiplayer series. So basically, the survival simulator aspects have been removed. Monster Hunter 2 DOS is the main focus of this video because it represents, celebrates, and expands the original core gameplay loop of Monster Hunter, before Monster Hunter Portable 2nd boiled down the gameplay loop into a string of boss fights and grinding. Instead, Monster Hunter 2 DOS is a survival hunting and gathering village simulation game, and the last truly survival and simulator focused title in the series.
Personally, I've never really had a problem with the like quote-unquote grinding aspect of Monster Hunter. It's a satisfying grind, and it feels good. Like, usually when you like think about grinding in a game, you get like frustrated and bored, and you're like, why do I have to put myself through this? But I really like it in Monster Hunter. Like in Rise, I created every single armor set, a weapon for every monster, and I had a blast doing it the whole time.
When the quest is completed, the player gets reward money for completing the quest, the subquest, account items sold, and finally, what the monster reward value is. This is a wonderful addition because it promotes the player to continue trying even if they faint. Fainting has no effect on the monster reward, only the quest reward. And the monster reward is almost always far higher than the quest reward.
I actually think that was like a really good point, because 3 faints and you're done is fine, but when you lose rewards for fainting, I don't actually think that actually makes any sense, like in the game. Like, you still got the job done. Like, why are you losing rewards just for like dying? I think it just
takes like the whole point of 3 feints out of it, because a lot of people, they'll just quit the hunt and they'll say, I'm not going to do it, I'm just going to reset the quest. Imagine if you could get cart tickets. Like, you could earn cart tickets for beating like so many quests in a row without carting, and then when you do cart, you can use your cart ticket to keep the rewards. How good would that be? Why haven't Capcom thought of this idea? If I can think of it, they should be able to.
In Monster 2 DOS, Wrathion's reward is roughly 4,500 zenny. That's including the crest reward value and a median for the monster's reward value. In Monster Hunter World, Wrathion's reward is a flat 4,300 zenny. So, about the same. Well, let's compare the base Iron Longsword, Iron Katana, which is 3,150 zenny to forge, and Iron Grace 2, which is 4,000 zenny to upgrade. In total, that's 6,300 zenny to complete forging and 4 upgrades to the Iron Longsword in Monster Hunter
so
World.
much easier. Oh my god, it's so cheap in World. What is that, 100 zenny? They may as well not have even put money in the game. Like, usually, if you've got the parts, you've got the money. That's interesting.
How many Wrathion does one need to hunt in each respective game to complete these upgrades? Well, in Monster 2 DOS, the player must hunt roughly 15 Wrathion to fully upgrade their longsword. In Monster Hunter World, the player must hunt roughly 2 Wrathion to fully upgrade their longsword.
And he said Monster Hunter 2 DOS doesn't have a grind.
I always wondered why the game would give the player 2 minutes to decide what to do with the monster rewards after completing a quest, when the only thing I would ever do with them is send all to item box. You'll notice in Monster 2 DOS, send to box is not an option. The player is only allowed to take the items directly and place them directly in their item pouch. If their item pouch is full, they are required to choose which items to take and which items to sell. If the item pouch was full, the player may have to decide to sacrifice their potions just to take back a Wrathion scale. In these scenarios, every decision matters. I legitimately think that the people at Capcom aren't stupid. They make mistakes, but I don't think that, I'm pretty sure this is deliberate. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put it into the game.
Actually, Mickey, I think I agree with Jacob. Good game designers, often a series of interesting choices. And they're literally giving you the ultimate choice of keeping the items you might need versus other items you might need. So if you're sacrificing your potions, which are a lot harder to get, versus a really rare material, it makes it a much more engaging decision to make. Why do you even go down and hit take all? Of course you're gonna take it all. It's not even a decision really. I just think it's a more interesting decision when you have those limitations like that.
Whenever the game shows itself to be a video game, the more it will be potentially less immersive for the player.
Actually, when I think about it, I think Rise is probably the less immersed I've felt in a Monster Hunter. It definitely feels very video gamey in the way that you can do all these crazy stunts and abilities. I don't think that's bad. People say oh, it's no immersion, it's not good, but I still love Rise. It's just interesting to think that that's probably the first game where I didn't feel as immersed. It felt more video gamey.
The big point I want to make here, and I'm gonna put it up on the screen here, no matter how good the picture looks, it's only a picture. The moment the player can actively interact with the picture is when it becomes an immersive world. Monster Hunter World is not any more immersive than any other title in the series. Funny enough, in Monster Hunter World, the player will gain resource points just by looking at the monster. The farm system continues to remain as it was.
That's so true, though. Actually, I just had a thought. What if you could get the points by looking at a monster if you, did a little animation where you're, actually, writing notes or something, or, the monster was doing something meaningful, or you actually use those binoculars they give you, and you, look at it from a distance and study it, and then you're oh, I write down my notes, and oh, now I know that I can get this part of the monster by doing this. I reckon that would be cool.
It would keep the fight going if the player is running out of supplies. However, this is nullified by the fact that the player can simply return to the base camp tent and access their entire supply of thousands of potions.
That's one of my biggest criticisms with the new games, with refilling your inventory at camp. I can maybe understand having a huge supply of stuff back at the village where you can store stuff that's not, you can't visually see it, but it is stored in some place, but like the fact that you can bring that to camp, like that's like what is this, like capsule corp? Like, are we storing all these monster parts in tiny little capsules and then like opening them up? Okay, cool, we're gonna have a camp and you can bring items there, but you can only have these items. You can only have like 10 items that you can bring, but you can't have everything. I think everything breaks the game.
Despite the return of the sandy plains in Monster Hunter Rise, they have not brought back the changing temperature system of the desert that was in Monster Hunter 3 Tri. Similarly to Monster Hunter...
Okay guys, cool drinks, hot drinks, what do we think? I'm kinda happy we don't have to use them. I've got this interesting idea though, and again, I want to do this in a video. I think they should use layered armor to combat the weather effects. That way that you're doing something about the weather, but you're not just drinking some arbitrary potion you got to check up on every now and then. You're wearing the warm clothing to go to the cold map. I think that makes for an interesting choice. You can see you're dressed for the environment, but it doesn't affect your other armor stats at all.
It does seem arbitrary, I get it. This plays into Capcom's focus on prioritizing DPS boss fights over a survival simulator game. The game requires the player to actively eliminate both small and large monsters. Every monster is out to attack the player. Small monsters should be eliminated first before tackling the large monster.
When he said like every monster is out there to attack the player, that it really is. You don't know true fear until you've had 8 Bullfango charging you at once.
In Monster Hunter 4G, the players can stand next to these monsters, and after spending 20 seconds taunting the player, will they finally attempt to attack. It's not like the player has to fight back
They just
anyway.
kind of
The
exist.
Palicos will probably just kill them.
I mean, like the small monsters in the new games, they just kind of like sit there and exist there. They might as well be like farming points, because they'll just sit there and wait for you to kill them, just like he's saying.
I've seen the common complaints that the hitboxes are terrible in the older titles. Everyone hates the Plesioth. The Plesioth has a massive hitbox. So what? Learn the monster and keep your distance. Every time he jumps out of the water, just wait for him to shoot water and smack his head.
Yeah, that's where he is maybe not the best opinion on that. You can criticize that. Like, I think that there is room for criticizing when it comes to large hitboxes. You've only got to work with the information you're given, and if you're out of the space of the monster's actual body, you shouldn't really be getting hit. Like, that is fundamentally a gameplay problem. Yeah, it's because it's like janked out, and you can be like 6 feet away from it and still get hit. So that's the issue. Whereas he's saying like, oh, like you saw that like the hitbox is jank, so you should just account for the jank hitbox.
Hitboxes are hitboxes. With each game, hitboxes are getting tighter and tighter, but ultimately it doesn't matter how tight it is. If the game is designed to punish the player for attacking the legs, then just don't attack the legs. Use a different strategy. Sure, it's a slower fight than the other monsters, but Monster 2 DOS wasn't about fast DPS, it was about strategizing and thinking carefully. The tighter hitboxes in current games has only made hitting them.
And as you'll find out, I don't think Jacob likes fast DPS. He criticizes DPS boss fights a lot. I think he wants it to return to the old way somehow.
Alatreon in Iceborne is an interesting fight. It has very tight hitboxes, and with practice, the player can quickly memorize the patterns and learn to take advantage of them. He'd be easy if it wasn't for the incredibly high health number he has. On one hand, it reminds me of the old games, because careful player positioning is key, but it's also Monster Hunter World, so it requires prioritizing DPS. The DPS checks are specifically to make the player prioritize DPS.
DPS is only really a problem in Monster Hunter World when you get to Alatreon. It's endgame. Like, it's post credits, so you don't have to engage with it if you don't want to. And I think at the end game, like, that's fine. But it sounds like he's arguing that Monster Hunter World, like the whole thing, is a DPS boss fight, and I don't really think so. Like, I think you can play any armor set and get through any fight in the game eventually just by like learning it and not needing specific armor skills. That's my opinion.
A good strategy for Plesioth in Monster 2 DOS is to poison it. While it swims in the water, it'll be poisoned and thus damage is being dealt even if the player can't actively attack it. Was this the intended way to defeat Plesioth? What is the proper intended way to defeat Plesioth? What did the developers want the player to do? Aside from, using a ranged weapon.
I kind of like what he's saying about Plesioth kind of requires like a ranged weapon and to change your approach. I think the game could go a long way in like explaining this to you. I think there should be some kind of hint.
Fights like the one against Plesioth in Monster 2 DOS are rare in modern Monster Hunter titles, which is why the best one I could compare it to was Elatrion.
Don't you think it's kind of hilarious that he's even like comparing Plesioth to Elatrion? Like that's how like dramatic like people feel about like how annoying that hunt is. Just this casual fish monster that's like a mid-tier monster. It's being compared to like the second last boss of Iceborne Endgame.
This is the G-Rank Rathalos numbers. It's at this point that it should be clear that the monster health has bloated immensely in 5th generation. Monster Hunter Double Cross had a bit of bloat, but that was because...
Well, there is... I can definitely see that, and you can feel that in Iceborne, that the monsters are much tougher. But I think they do that with the idea in mind that you're going to be using the clutch claw, tenderizing, wall banging, turf wars. If you play as a traditional hunter, like of course it's gonna take a lot longer because of those health pools.
There's also a large number of environmental traps and triggers that can do massive damage to the monster. The turf war...
Yeah, I didn't even include that in my argument, but yeah, that's obviously there as well. Like there's so many things that you can do to deal massive damage to the monster. So I don't think you necessarily need to spec your armor for DPS. But yeah, obviously the monsters are taking a lot more health, so I can see what he's saying.
See, I find this to all have an air of contradicting design philosophy. Take, for example, the player doesn't use any environmental traps or gimmicks at all and focuses primarily on the abilities as a skilled player. The player will DPS their way to victory. This is fine. Depending on their skill level and their equipment, they may finish the quest very fast or very slow. There are a lot of variables there. Meanwhile, for another example, the player bases their tactics slowly around environmental traps and gimmicks. I don't think it's possible.
But isn't this like the great thing about Monster Hunter? You've got so many options at your disposal and you can like take it in like any direction you want. And I think that's nothing but a good thing. I don't think anyone's being penalized. It's up to you how you want to play, and if that's how you want to play, that's what how you want to play.
They have made it extremely easy to stack skills that raise attack and affinity. Attack up level 7, which increases attack by 21 and affinity by 5%. Elemental attack up level 6, which increases elemental damage by 20% and adds a straight 100 on top. Ailment attack level 4, which increases ailment buildup by
30%, plus another 10 ailment. Critical eye level 7 increases affinity by 40%. Critical boost level 3 increases damage dealt with critical hits by 40%. Weakness exploit level 3 increases affinity by 30% when attacking a monster's weak point. It also increases it to another 20%, making it 50% on wounded parts. Critical draw level 3 increases affinity on draw attacks by 100%. Latent power level 7 increases affinity by 60%. Agitator level 7 increases affinity by 20%.
You can't actually stack all those, can you though? Like, doesn't it have like a cap where it like stops at a certain point? I think I've seen Gaijin Hunters say something about that.
and adds plus 28 to attack value. Peak Performance level 3 adds plus 20 attack value.
Heroics level 7, when the conditions are met, increases attack power by 40%. Fortify can increase your attack by 10%, and then another 10% can be stacked on top of that. Resentment level 5 adds plus 25 attack. Artillery level 7 increases specific attacks by 50%. Maximum Might level 5 increases affinity by 40% when stamina gauge is full. Affinity Final increases affinity by 30% after flying. Crit Armor increases elemental damage when landing critical.
Wow. So many skills. Oh my gosh.
I have a bold and wacky suggestion to Capcom I'm gonna make, based off of my completely personal subjective opinions. It'll be really quick, then I'll be back to the objective stuff. Basically, I think the game would be better without any attack boost skills from armor whatsoever. We already have a viable method to increase attack, and that's by upgrading weapons at the blacksmith. Any additional attack boosts should be solely through food or item buffs.
I agree with this. What do you guys think about the just leaving attack skills on weapons? Like, don't you think that just makes sense? Like, it's our weapon. It's the part that deals damage. We can already upgrade the weapon. Why does our armor give us more attack skills? Like, it's armor. Don't you think it should have defensive skills? I kind of agree with him on this.
What I'm saying is that armor should be built to be armor, defensive, while weapons should be built as offensive, and that we should return to how it was in Monster Hunter 1, so that if you're upgrading your weapon, that's how you upgrade your attack. If you upgrade your armor, that's how you upgrade your defense.
Yeah, I agree with this. Like, that's pretty much just what I was saying just before. It just logically makes sense.
I appreciate Monster 2 DOS because upgrading armor is more complex. There's even times where it gives the player branching paths for the armor, similar to weapons. The player can choose the piece that gives them the skill.
I think I missed this on the first time I watched the video. I didn't know there were branching paths to the armor in Monster Hunter DOS. Let's see if he elaborates.
Skills they prefer, or what looks fashionable. The player can't always just upgrade every piece to max immediately. There's more thought put into every decision, as the materials to upgrade the armor are the same materials that are used for upgrading weapons. Look, I say I appreciate Monster 2 DOS's armor system, but I don't want to spin this game as being perfect. It isn't. The game has extremely high expectations of what the player is able to accomplish, and expects an absurd number of difficult-to-acquire items. For example, I wish to face the Kirin, but my armor has low thunder defense. The best thunder defense armor aside from the Kirin armor is the Kezu armor. Alright, so I'll get some Kezu armor. The Kezu armor from Monster 2 DOS asks for not 1, not 2, but 3 pale bones, which is Kezu's rare carve, the 3% drop rate if captured, and an 8% if the Kezu's back is broken. By the way, like every armor in the game, gives the player basically nothing good, no real good active skills. I must now fully upgrade the armor. Of course, instead of armor spheres it calls for monster materials, and specifically it calls for a pickled Kezu whelp. What? Well, in Monster 2 DOS, the player gets an item that is essentially a pickling jar. After climbing the snowy mountains and receiving a Kezu whelp from mining here, I combined it with the
This is so obscurely specific what he needs to do.
pickling jar. Unfortunately, it doesn't even become a pickled Kezu whelp immediately. I have to place the item on the ground and wait 5 minutes of actual in-game time before the white smoke changes to pink, which means if I gather the item back, I'll now have a pickled Kezu whelp. All of this I had to research off of an online Japanese database because the game does not provide the player with any of this information. And I discovered that the further upgrades to the armor, the upgrades that allow me to have actual active armor skills, all require another pale bone. That's 5 more pale bones, on top of the 3 I needed for the armor set. No, attack! No!
You can tell like how upset he is at this game. I love it.
Are you kidding me? No, 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 no. Cool, I didn't get it. That's real cool. Thank you, game. The game providing a wiki for the player is arguably a quality of life change. The older monster notes in the older games would usually refer to a monster ecology over advice on how to kill the monster. Honestly, the player could just as easily find these details on an online wiki via the internet, and I'm sure the games were balanced over the years with this in mind anyway. I'm sure the devs are aware that the players have probably data mined the games. To me, it breaks immersion when the game gives the player hunter all the monster weaknesses the moment the player discovers a previously undiscovered monster species.
I don't know if I like subconsciously think that there's some kind of like Wrathion library somewhere and they already have all this information and they just send it to you when it's relevant. To me, it's just handy, and I'm not going to complain if the game gives me information, because otherwise I can just look it up.
The older games aren't better because the hunting is better. The hunting has progressively gotten better over the titles, I hope I've proved that. The older games are perceived better by veteran fans because there is more to the game's experience than just DPS boss fights.
You can hear like the frustration in his voice when he's like talking about DPS boss fights. He's so he's so against it.
I know this is an extreme example and I've used it in a previous video, but take for example the whetstone. In Monster Hunter World, the whetstone is a permanent addition to the player item pouch and is now infinite use, similar to the pickaxe. These are also quality of life changes. The whetstones were implemented into the original game to prevent the player from hitting the monster too much. It's to prevent DPS, and to have the player be conscious about their hits. I didn't explore sharpness skills when I discussed all the attacks.
The old games hated DPS, and so should you.
Despite not being able to read most of the Japanese text in Monster 2 DOS, there is enough context clues that reveal that the ancient tower had to have been built by an ancient powerful civilization.
Here we go. This is the story stuff about the Kushala Daora Tower that I just love. So, yeah, get ready for this. I love this. Genius.
as it is ruined and no people are presently living within the tower, nor does any of the currently living NPCs have the capabilities or technology to recreate the tower. The tower is a symbol of something that no longer exists. When you mine at the tower, you gain Kashela Daora scales, providing the subtext, context, to believe that the tower itself is made from Kashela Daora bodies, which is the flagship monster of Monster Hunter 2 DOS. The fight against Kashela Daora is stretched over 3 separate hunts in 3 separate environments. This is a difficult and long fight. After defeating this monster, the game shows the player a tower built out of their dead bodies. The tower is a symbol of a civilization that hunted the monsters to oblivion. The legendary Elder Dragon isn't so legendary anymore, it's just endangered. This
Holy moly, I get like goosebumps thinking about that. Like how they just like subtly like just put that in there and just like trusted you to like understand that is just wild.
Despite this mighty civilization, managing to slay tens of thousands of these dragons to build a tower out of them, the civilization is now dead and gone. Their victory was fleeting, and their symbol of their power and accomplishments is now the home of Lunastra. Ultimately, the game is indirectly telling the player that their triumph over the monsters are not an achievement, and even if you slay 1,000 or 10,000 of these Kashela Daoras, the player will eventually die.
Boom! Oh my god. What do you guys think about that? I don't like that's so deep. I don't know if like Monster Hunter is really trying to teach us that. Like I can see the inference, but holy crap, that's so deep. That could only come from a mind of someone who reviews Monster Hunter DOS for 3.5 hours.
Overall, interesting, different, subtle. You know, over a decade later, I wonder what Capcom can do with their storytelling in a massive AAA-style game. How much have they expanded in their storytelling when it comes to Monster Hunter World? What is Monster Hunter World's narrative?
Yeah, get ready for this. I don't think he liked it very much.
Sisters and brothers of the Fifth Fleet, it's time. I'll keep my farewell brief.
Now, I've replayed Monster Hunter World in full multiple times, and every new file, it makes me laugh at this opening. It sets up the Admiral as this important man, only for him to come off as an irresponsible buffoon if you actually play the game. Monster Hunter World attempts to simulate a military operation instead of the village concept that was in all the other Monster Hunter games. The story follows an army of elite soldiers, an army. Then they are colonizing a new world. It's really bizarre that they created a game that celebrates the colonization period of human history. The destruction of native culture and peoples is a pain that is still felt.
What do you guys think about this? This was really controversial. Like, this upset a lot of people, like, saying that Monster Hunter World was about colonization. And, like, when I listened to him talk about it, like, I'm kind of on board with him. But at the same time, like, I wanna get other people's opinions and see what other people think, because it's a sensitive topic.
Hundreds of years later, whether it be Africa, Australia, or the Americas, colonization is considered in retrospect as an unfortunate mistake that we must live with and learn from. Monster Hunter World's reasoning for colonization is rooted in the Elder Crossing, which essentially a group of scientists desire to know the reason why elder dragons flock to another continent every decade. I do not understand how solving the Elder Crossing is at all beneficial for the overall well-being of the people in the Monster Hunter universe. I can only theorize that it is simply a front for colonization, which would be funded by the established kingdoms within the Monster Hunter world. The guild, frankly, should not be in the new world because they have no good reason to be there.
I feel like ever since I heard this like theory, I've like been able to unhear it. And in my current playthrough of Iceborne, I'm just like, they're murderers. They're senseless, indiscriminate murderers. Oh my god.
I don't understand how everyone in this game is so brain dead and bloodthirsty. When Zora Magdaros is preparing to die in the Everstream, the guild gives the army a choice between packing up and leaving, or repelling the monster. They insist on staying, leading to this massive operation. Nergigante shows up and wishes to eat Zora Magdaros. The guild tries to kill Nergigante despite it having the potential to help them in their effort. Capcom did not even make an attempt to have Nergigante, write it in so that he would be helping them. Don't know why. The guild insists.
It's almost like they put Nergigante in the game to make you question it. Because it's kind of like, he is sort of set up to, help your problem, yet we're just ignoring that. And I don't think I thought about that before, so they explain that if Zora died in the live stream, it would destroy the new world. Yeah, I'm not sure if I caught that. Maybe the game wasn't clear enough in explaining that. But there's a lot of stuff that Monster Hunter World just brushes over. It's just easy to miss some stuff, so.
The player must then kill Nergigante despite it being a natural deterrent to Elder Dragons. After killing Nergigante, more Elder Dragons show up. Big surprise! The player hunter is tasked to fight Xeno'jiiva. Why? Is it threatening the guild's operation? When Xeno'jiiva grows into Safi'jiiva, it doesn't attack the guild at all. Despite this, the guild still insists the player hunter kill Safi'jiiva. Despite solving the Elder Crossing and killing one of every species living in the New World, the guild refuses to.
I think I've got to admit, even I thought the Xeno'jiiva and the Safi'jiiva thing was sus. They just kind of get thrown at you at the end. There's no build-up about them. You just sort of here's this monster, kill it. It's oh, how come? It's just because. Just do it. It's interesting. It's interesting to think about, I think. It seems like the guild has so many claims. When someone says something too often, it's like a lie. So they say so often oh, we're doing this for nature. They almost say it too much, if you know what I'm saying. It always seems like it's within their own interest. They could leave New World and let nature do its thing. Sure, it's gonna destroy New World, whatever. But I mean, isn't that nature in itself? Isn't them interfering with that against nature? You gotta ask yourself these questions.
Why was this man hired? Why was this man given this responsibility? Why do any of the other characters give him any
You can just hear how much he hates the Admiral. There's so many conflicting views and so many people get heated over it is because it isn't explained well and people have got all of their own perceptions of it and it just clashes and they just get into fights about it. Whereas I think there's not really a whole lot to go off. Otherwise, why is he asking so many questions? And I think that's the game's fault for not explaining enough. And I think it's also partially anybody's fault for expecting story from Monster Hunter. But I mean, there was that whatever he picked up from Monster Hunter DOS, that was interesting, but I don't know.
Shouldn't they send an entire army to kill Elatrion? Why are they only sending your character? Why are they trying to kill Elatrion? Why is Elatrion even here?
Because video games.
I really need to ask. Do any of the players honestly find this story to be reasonable?
Oh my gosh. He's so triggered by the story. I can't ever say that I've put this much thought into the Monster Hunter World story, but I love what he's coming up with. This is good material.
Or okay. Frankly, this is awful. These characters are batshit insane. Honestly, what the f*** is going on?
Bioenergy. Lurking so close, yet hiding so well.
The monsters aren't invading territories they don't belong to. They are moving as they've always done for thousands or millions of years. The only true invasive species is humans.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's brilliant. I think that's really good. And whether or not the game intended to do that, you can see how he reached that conclusion, and I like that a lot.
Even after everything is said and done, is Monster 2 DOS worth playing? If you're a masochist, then yeah, you should play Monster 2 DOS. It's probably the most difficult video game I've ever played.
That was the most disheartening thing I remember when I first watched this video. Like, holy crap. Like, I was like, oh yeah, this sounds like it's going to be an upgrade of Monster Hunter 1. Nope.
And there you have it. That was my reaction to Jacob's Monster Hunter Dose review. I hope that it was entertaining for you and that it made you think critically about the series. There were so many interesting points that he brought up in his video. What were some of your favorites? I'd love to see the debate continue in the comments below. My full live reaction to the video will be included in the description, as well as the original video as well. And be sure to send Jacob some love in the form of a like, comment, or share of his video. Anyway, I've been KRRool, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.